Don't you walk on me.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 56 of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. I'm your host, Victor Lucia, founder and president of the BFC. Before we dive into this episode, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in every week. If it wasn't for you, I'd have no show, so I want you to know how much I appreciate all of you. Moving forward, I'll be providing different coupon codes for every episode. This week, use the code BFC321, BFC is in all caps, for 20% off any order from our shop. I made a mistake on the last promo code. It didn't apply to memberships, but this one does. It's valid from Sunday the 5th until Sunday the 12th. This discount will not be announced anywhere else but here, so take advantage of it today by visiting brooklynfishingclub.com. And again, thank you for listening to the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast.
I had a really cool life. My grandfather came to Miami in the 30s from England. He was on a ship and went around the world a few times working on a boat when he's like 13 years old. So he was like a real adventurous guy, and, jumped on a ship in England when they were calling for crew and didn't even tell his mother, rode her from the next port. So, he was my favorite, relative, just a super cool guy. And mainly because he took me fishing on the party boat and was just a super soft hearted guy. And then my dad took me, my first memory with my dad's riding on his shoulder shooting quail, and I'm talking little, the first thing I remember in life was fishing with my grandfather in a pond near my house here and hunting with my dad. And that kind of kicked off the way the rest of my childhood was going to go. I fished the ocean with my grandfather and hunted and fished with my dad and fished a lot of freshwater out in the Everglades, and never had any idea that passion was going to take me anywhere. At the IGFA event the other night, I got to tell a story about my dad was a plumber for 50 years or close to 50 years. And I worked with him when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old. I was the only son. My dad was such a great influence in my life. Really hard worker. He was a plumber from an early age. He decided to get his plumbing license and worked in that field for almost 50 years. And I started working for him when I was 12, 13 years old, and, did that for a few years. And then when I went to college, I just went Tuesdays and Thursdays because I was already working on boats. At like age 16, I started working on the Caterpillar boat owned by Kelly Tractor. And after 5 years, it's, kind of like a Van Wilder deal. I took 5 years for a 2-year degree. And when it was all said and done, it killed me to do it, but I had to tell him that I was going to fish instead of be a plumber. And it broke my heart to tell him, I knew he was anxiously awaiting my help, but he was the coolest guy. He said, I want you to do what you love, and I want you to chase your dreams. So it was really cool. When I got the award the other night, I dedicated it to him. He was in the audience, and it was a pretty touching moment. He, it dawned on me like 10 years ago, all the, cool experiences I got to have fishing with tournaments and trophies and so on. Dad never got that. They don't have plumbing tournaments. And
Right.
I always felt kind of guilty, like, God, he worked hard, and he's just such a good guy, and everybody loved him. And he had a lot of the, same customers his whole career. And he never got any real accolades. So it was very, very cool to be able to, in front of so many people that we all knew, to say thank you. And
That's
that was
amazing.
probably the most special part of that award, was finally recognizing him for not just who he was, but what a cool guy he was. That, your only son, after, it was almost like torture, going to school for 5 years, and you know, thinking that he's going to start retiring. And then I tell him, sorry, Dad. And he had to sell the company to some, a guy named Steve, and,
Oh,
didn't get a whole lot out of it. And just, God, it always haunted me, obviously. So, it was so nice to
so
finally say thank you
it
for
still
letting me.
does a little bit, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he let me chase my dream,
Yep.
and that was the most special part of that award was he was there. He's had a couple strokes in the last few months, and he's 84 years old, and it was just so cool to finally say thanks, Dad.
God bless you, man. That's amazing, and God bless him. That
Yeah,
the fact that he was there to see it and there to see how successful you've gotten, that is something not all of us get to enjoy. So
well,
I lost
I
my dad
know.
in 2020, and
Wow.
one of the most difficult parts in losing him has been any sort of success that I've achieved since he's been gone.
Yeah,
He was always the first guy I would call if I did something
yeah,
great or if I did something bad,
yeah,
And the toughest part in losing him, honestly, was just all these different forms of success I achieved after he was gone. And
yeah,
even to this day, I still sometimes go to reach for my phone to call him. And it's been, it's
yeah.
been 3 years this month. So
Wow.
God bless you guys. I'm so happy for you guys that you got to enjoy that together, and
Yeah.
I'm happy you made him proud in your decision. I'm sure there were some times along the way in your career where you wondered if maybe you should have gone the
Yeah.
other route, right?
Yeah. When I was building my first charter boat, I remember looking in the mirror at like 11 o'clock one night, coated in white dust. I've been grinding the bilge for, most of the day. And
Yeah.
I looked at the mirror, and I had left a 20-year job with on salary with benefits and a truck and a secretary and a cell phone and mate. And, I became a single dad and needed to be self-employed. I had to care of my daughter and, Brittany. And I looked in the mirror and I just broke down in tears. I was like a clown with his makeup running, tears going down my cheek with white
Yeah.
powder running, And I remember that was like the lowest of lows. Like, what have I done? But then I had to remember why I was doing it, and it all turned out fine. And, here we are with, 3 kids now and a couple grandkids, and you realize it was all worth it because it was all what was best for our relationships. And that's like that's your beacon that you got to keep, looking towards.
Right. So is your firstborn Brittany? Is that who Miss Britt
Yeah.
Charters is named after?
Yeah. That's when I became a single dad. I knew I needed to be available. I had to be there in
Yeah.
the summer when she was out of school and have control of my schedule. And that's why I named the boats after her. And she was the other significance is my grandfather was from Great Britain. So, if it would have been a boy, he would have been named Albert, like my grandfather. But since it was a girl, it was
Uh-huh.
as close as I could come to honoring grandpa. So that was
Yeah.
kind of a dual meaning in that name.
So let's talk a little bit about Miss Britt Charters. It's obviously a legendary charter business. For anybody that doesn't know about it, now you do. Let's hear a little bit about how you started it and how you built it up, and some of the obstacles that might have presented themselves along the way while you were doing that.
Well, it's like any small business, it's it's no guarantees. And one thing I learned from my dad and my grandfather was just the value of you know, just endurance. You just can't. My dad said when I decided to leave the Kellys, which were, by the way, just the greatest people to work for. They gave me a chance when I was a teenager, when I didn't know anything. And from 79 to 99, for 20 years, I worked for them, ran the same 38-foot Bertram, put 4 sets of engines in it. So that's where I learned a little bit of the boat building skill. And I didn't even realize they were putting me through college, and I didn't even realize it. And to leave them was really difficult. But I knew, obviously, being a good dad was more important. And my dad told me, he said, "Now you're a barber." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If they come for one haircut, you'll never make it." My
Wow,
dad was full of those
that is great.
one-liners.
That is great. Oh
Yeah,
man,
now he was hard.
that's how my grandma Dowie was. We used to, her name was Dorothy, but somehow when we were babies, her nickname became Dodo, and
Uh-huh.
we used to call all her one-liners Dowieisms because she just had so many one-liners. I don't even know.
Yeah,
You could write a book off it, but anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
But
So that really summed it up. You had to. I knew that I needed the right boat to start with, and working for Cat all those years, there was a mechanic named Stan Ware. He'd been with him 40 years, and he gave me the wisdom to pick a 3406B, which was their mechanical 6-cylinder inline workhorse, and build a boat around it. And I found a boat up in Palm Beach. Bobby Gernhauser from the Blue Moon charter boat on Jupiter Inlet owned it, the mold. And then Lou Rambo had a deal with Bobby where he would pay Bobby $5,000 for every boat he pulled out of it. And that just became the deal. I gave Lou a bunch of money to start the project, a little more than he asked for. And January 31st, 1999 was my final day with the Kellys. Gave them 4 months notice because, that was the right thing to do by them. They were great bosses. And Lou thought he would take, 4 or 5 months to build the boat. I figured, well, I could go up there and work with him the last month and finish the boat out. And I go there the first week at the beginning of this whole deal, and he's got the boat in the mold, everything's great. I'm excited. Well, then the work really showed up with the Kellys, boat just, running certain trips they wanted to get in before I left, and then put the boat in the boat yard because my mate was young and he needed to get his license, helping him get his license. So that's what the 4 months was good for. And then I leave February 1st, 99. I go up to Palm Beach, to Riviera Beach, to see the boat, and it's exactly how I left it 4 months earlier. And I was devastated. And Lou was full of apologies. He had 5 boats on the floor, 2 guys helping him. He was just overwhelmed. And unfortunately, squeaky wheel gets the grease. I didn't really talk to him too much or go up there because I was underwater working, my last 4 months with the Kellys. We're fishing a lot.
yeah,
So, and, there's a great example of where my dad came through. I didn't know what to say. You can remember, I lived in a padded cell working for the Kellys. They just took care of everything. My
yeah,
schedule, I had a secretary for my schedule. We fished 150 to maybe 175 days a year, perfect pace, time for maintenance, time for personal things. It was a great schedule. And I didn't realize how good I had it until that moment. Then I'm looking at this boat still in the mold, and I'm like, what do I do? So I told Lou, I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I knew that.
right.
I said, let me just go talk to my dad. So I went and talked to him, and Dad's short version was, suck it up, fix it with Lou so that you can work with him. Everything you need to finish that boat, you need to put on a piece of paper, and you need to have your thoughts collected before you go back in that door. And you ask him for everything you need. Today is your chance to get any concession you need, but do not ask for one more thing tomorrow. That was his advice. So I took like 2 hours and I thought of everything. I need a key to the shop, 7-day-a-week access. I need all my materials at dead cost instead of 10% over. Because now I'm broke, right? I'm going to be broke because I'm unemployed, and I had a little reserve built up, but not enough. And bottom line, man, I just start going down the list. I need to use your material out of the scrap bin. I'll write down the quarts of resin I use, blah, blah, blah. Go through this whole thing. And I want Jerry, your nephew, to work under me 40 hours a week and let me pay him directly after 40 hours. He agreed to all of it. And 4 months later, I rolled out of there with the boat. And I lived there 7 days a week.
Wow.
So you talk about getting thrown in the fire. That goes back to looking in the mirror and crying. That was probably like month 2 or 3, where I'm just burned out and
Damn.
going, what have I done? But the benefit was I knew every inch of that boat. And you can imagine when everybody rolls out of there at 5 o'clock and I'm working till 11 or later, that's when I could just go to town, like extra glass on the rudder deck,
Yeah.
extra glass on the stringers, custom battery decks, all the little cool things. I built a bench seat fish box with inch and a half foam because I didn't know if I was going to be charter fishing or commercial fishing or bait fishing. So I set the boat up for all of it. And that's what took that amount of time. And I just went overboard and built the boat like a tank. And believe it or not, 24 years later, it's still rolling. It's tired. It's got lots of scratches and dents, but we keep painting it and fixing it. And that engine, back to that guy uh, telling me about that 3406B, I put 36,000 hours on that first engine, on that engine before the first rebuild, and then rebuilt it, and it's now still going. I probably got about 18,000 on it now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so
That's amazing.
Old Stan Ware was right, but that's kind of that's kind of the story. Just kind of accidentally got into building it with Jerry, and Lou, of course, helped with some of the technical stuff like setting the engine in place and the drivetrain. But what an education, and that really jump started me. My advice that I learned from that experience was start with the right boat. You can't go get a Kia and start a taxi business.
Right.
It's not built for that, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to pick on a Kia. It could be one of any lower end brands. You can't put that through commercial use. And so what I was able to do is have a commercial grade engine, derated, so it's not really taxing the engine. You're not pulling all the horsepower out of it, and build the boat like a tank, and build all the provisions, live wells, rod holders, etc. And now you got something that you don't make money the first few years, really. You're really making money when you survive like your fifth year. Now the boat's, mostly paid for, hopefully, and, now you're getting ahead. But the point is, you can't have a boat falling apart at 5 years.
Right.
I've known several charter guys that just took like a random outboard, open fisherman, and tried to charter with it. And by year 5, yeah, they're finally paid off on some things, but the boat's falling apart because it wasn't built for the task.
Yeah. So once you get the boat built, how do you go about building your client base, your customer base?
Well, I was a little bit like Forrest Gump, not a little bit, a lot of it. I was ignorant to a lot of things because, remember, I just had such a great job with the Kellys, and salary and benefits and so on, and profit sharing. I had all that, insurance. And I really didn't, kind of like Forrest, I wasn't that smart where I really had a plan. I just knew that I needed to be home with my daughter, and that seemed like the right job for me. And what I realized was that totally accidentally, all those years I'd worked for the Kellys, remember, they never chartered that boat. It was all, just gifted trips to all their clients, right? Well, Kelly Tractor's territory is the southern half of Florida, Fort Pierce South, basically. And I didn't even think about it, but all those people could never charter the boat all those 20 years. So when I went on my own, and obviously, I had a great relationship with the Kellys. They helped me out with the price of the engine, et cetera. When people inquired, they sent them to me. So I had some built-in business that I really didn't even expect. But it was think of all the companies that do business with a cat dealer, even hospitals with generators, of course, heavy equipment. And you have marine customers, they have a million accessories. And all those customers in time, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of those customers in time found me. And it was really a gift that I didn't expect. And that helped get me jump started. So I have to say that was kind of an unfair advantage if you compared it to somebody who's starting out with no history.
Was there any equivalent of social media back then, or not an equivalent of, but something you could compare it to? I mean, in terms, like, would you take out an ad in the paper, or was it a lot of word of mouth? I mean,
yeah, it was mostly word of mouth, and you get your occasional magazine article. The one thing that did change because remember, the Kellys were all about entertaining the clients, right? So we only fished 2 tournaments a year: the Bertram Hatteras Shootout and Walker's Cay, and then Miami Billfish Tournament. Those were really the 2 main tournaments. And it was cool because back then there wasn't a lot of knowledge, like how we used to tie our own goggle eye quills with an oversized eye hook. The eye of the hook was a little big. You'd push the hair through the eye and tie it, with thread, and put a little glue on it. And, we hand tied our quills. There were things that just weren't known by most, and those became the advantages that made it so much easier to win back then than it is today. Today, the just enormous amount of knowledge that's available with a few clicks um, have really evened the playing field. But back then, there there's tons of stories where guys like the Dudases, or there's a handful of guys back then that were really hardworking, knowledgeable. Phil Slaga, SFE, Kites, uh, Frank Godwin. There were, Bill Harrison, who was my mentor. All those guys, wherever they fished, marlin fishing or sail fishing, those were the guys to watch because they had spent their lives charter fishing. And the things they learned were really what separated them from everybody else. And you just didn't have, like, people today don't realize what a void of knowledge there was if you had not spent your time on the water. And I was at the tail end of that, but I did benefit from a lot of those guys teaching me. Buddy Carey, fished with him a little bit. He died in 2000, but he was a captain for 55 years in Miami. So, you can't help but learn being around him. But the only way knowledge really got passed back then, and exposure for business, was through magazines and newspapers. Miami Herald, write an article every once in a while, or you get in win a tournament, get a magazine article or some how-to article, and that did boost our our phone calls. But remember, cell phones had just come on the scene, so even that helped us a lot, because now we could take a booking while we're on the water. That was a huge deal.
Oh yeah, I bet. Oh man, didn't even think of that.
Yeah, you kind of think they've always been in existence, but I remember in the 90s, in the 90s is when I started selling a lot of fish, maybe even late 80s, and having a cell phone on the water while I was commercial fishing to pre-commit to these fish to the restaurants. Then I'd go make the rounds to the sushi bars. This guy wanted 4 snappers, that guy wanted 6 dolphin, this guy wanted 2 wahoos, and you had all that done, man. All of a sudden, my life became efficient and profitable, and that's really how I got to pay for the boats and just things.
So how many boats do you have in the fleet now?
Well, I have 4, but I'm selling a gold line. I got a 26 gold line I'm about to sell. We replaced it with a 34 CV. But we have 3 working boats, 3 boats that we actively charter.
So you started with one, obviously. How long did you run that one before you added another one to the fleet?
2004, we started the walk around, and that came from, I mentioned that I started fishing a lot of tournaments when I started chartering. Well, Nick Smith was the first guy to book me for charters, and he had a walk around 37 Billy Knowles, and that boat was so efficient. Nick Smith was way ahead of his time, and he was just the most amazing angler. I could tell you stories for a long time about crazy things I watched him do that were just defied any logic.
Like what?
And well, the craziest one was, we were fishing on an edge off Triumph down, South Miami, and southeast wind. So my left kite was kind of going straight in shore, and Nick missed 2 sailfish in a row in 90 seconds. And he hardly ever missed, very rare. And he missed 2 in a row, and he was just livid. And I was like, don't worry, we're going to get another crack at him. We did not bend a rod on him. They just picked us off, and one got bill wrapped and shook his head, and the bait came off, and he ate the bait. So he was calm. And so no big deal. What we do is we trim everything in. I had 2 mates, Robbie and Alex, down there, fast guys. I'm like, guys, pull them in. We're going to reset 200 or 300 yards. They knew the drill. I just go, those fish are swimming into the current, north current. So they're swimming south, like trout in a river. And I just go 200 or 300 yards. I'm going to put them back out. They're going to pop right back up. We're on a color change. Just simple. I get about 100 yards. I'm on a plane doing 12, 13 knots. And all of a sudden I see a threadfin go flying across that color change. I'm on a plane. And I look down, and Nick is feeding the line for 1 second, feeling it, letting it go. Feel it for 1 second, let it go. I'm like, oh my God, what is he doing? And all of a sudden he goes, I got picked up. I'm thinking, really? I pull the boat back. He closes the bail. We got him on. True story. I'm on a plane and he is dumping a spinner as fast as it'll go. And he somehow, I don't know if he really knew it or it was luck, but he thought he got picked up and he closed the barrel. I slowed down and he got him on it and caught it. We caught the fish. But, that
That's
was just one. I
amazing.
could tell you another thing he would do. We'd hook a fish on a deep line. You have
Yeah.
no idea what it is. It's got a 2-ounce lead on it. He'd hook him and you just see him like touch the spool and load the rod up and, hammerhead. Or oh, it's a sale. Start getting everything ready. You're going to go after them. Just weird little comments, and 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 times he was right. I mean, he was right so many times I can't even tell you how few times he was wrong.
You could just
And it
call
was
it.
just he was at that time he was probably in his 60s, and he had been doing it so long by himself. That was the crazy part about Nick. How I knew Nick before he booked me was that crazy guy that was out flying 2 kites by himself in his 37 walk around. So imagine a 36 glass tech that he custom built, and he would be out there flying. He might only fly 2 baits per kite, but he was flying 2 kites. I watched him catch a triple in the Miami Billfish tournament. He's the only angler. Only angler. He would not bring anybody. And I watched him successfully get the release on 3 sailfish in about 5 minutes.
Oh
And
my
now,
gosh.
granted, all 3 did the right thing. It's like a little chess move. The first one, we hooked all 3. One of them sat right behind the boat. And by the way, this is a single engine boat. Backed straight up to him, got the release. All you had to do is back then tip it. You didn't have to touch it. So as soon as he got the leader through the tip, you had a judge, and the judge would say, release. He would hand the rod to the mate. Now the mate would just, try to get the fish close enough and cut him off, right? And then he goes to the second rod. He'd hook him, back the drag off to like a pound of drag. And the second one was right up off our bow. So since he got the release on the first one, I could go straight forward. He tightened the drag, wound tight on him, and the fish behaved, just laid there. Boom, got the second release. Third one's like off the side. Rolled the boat around, went after that one. Less than 5 minutes, 3 fish released by one angler. And he hooked them all, no assistance. Yeah, I could go on. There's just so many things like that.
That's crazy.
He was amazing. But the point is, I got the privilege of fishing a lot of tournaments because he booked like everything available. In the first 2 years, we won the Libertad, which was the big series in Miami or in South Florida. It consisted of several tournaments over the season's time, and that would be the same as the Quest for the Crest today. And we won it back-to-back years. The first 2 years,
Wow.
we had the boat, and that was an honor. I'd never won it before, and won the tournament, won the Miami Billfish for the first time in 19 years. I had lost the winning fish 4 other years. In that 5th year, we caught it with Nick and won it. I called my dad in tears because
Wow.
it was like climbing Everest, finally. Because that tournament back then was like 100 to 120 boats. Think about that.
That's amazing.
Everybody who was a sail fisherman was in that tournament from far and wide. So to win that tournament was tough.
What was the payout on that one?
I think we won a couple $100,000 because there were,
That's
so many
amazing.
boats in it. Yeah.
So let me ask you, where does Peter Miller come into your whole career?
Well, that was an amazing chapter in my life. So after fishing Nick, Nick told me, like, at the very first year, we're going to fish, these 3 years, and then I'm going to start fly fishing. So it was like he is very much like that. Just kind of make kind of strange statements, but he always sticks to them. And that was what he did. Well, ironically, right when that, 3-year deal ended, Kit Toomey, who's Peter's best friend, called me, hey, come over and see my boat. And he bought a 53 Viking, and I went over there just thinking I was going to check out his boat. He was an old friend, and he ended up hitting me with, what do you think about running it? I go, for what? Like a full time? Or he goes, no, just tournaments. You can still charter fish, and we'll have our tournament schedule set. And if you can work out getting captains to fill in on your boat, then back then I just had one boat, and we'll do tournaments. And I agreed to it, and it turned out Kit and Peter were the 2 just most amazing team I ever fished with. 2 anglers. I just can't tell you how automatic they were. They were like having 2 mates down there. Like there wasn't anything the mates could do that they couldn't do. Really, they put out their own kites, brought other baits, and of course, really good anglers. Both of them are just amazing. And I said it at that award ceremony the other night that, in life, sometimes you don't realize what you have until it's gone. And we did 5 seasons together and just won a ton of things together. And it wasn't until years. I mean, I was sad to go in a different direction, but I didn't realize how much I would miss him until later. And then I would think to myself periodically, God, man, I wish Kit and Peter were here, like we'd be in a hot bite and it would just be chaos and people freaking out. And I would have never, you didn't realize how good they were until you experienced other teams. Remember, I went from Nick Smith to Kit and Peter. So like 3 of the best anglers ever.
You've been pretty spoiled, huh?
Nothing. Yeah, I was so spoiled, and nothing against the people I fished with in later years. I fished with some great anglers and won a lot of tournaments with them, but it was not the same smoothness. It wasn't the same. What's the right word? Teamwork. I had Froggy Cooper, who I ended up fishing with him 5 years with Kit and Peter, and had been fishing with him for over 10 years prior to that. So imagine, a mate that you fish tournaments with for 10 years. And then we started the 5-year push. And then my wife, Charmaine, was second mate. And, she was no Froggy, she was no first mate, but she was a wonderful second mate, meaning whatever Froggy needed or Kit or Peter needed, she would be there to fill in.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most important things she did is when we were hooked up, she was always that person. Froggy needed to be paying attention to certain things, but she was that anchor on the rods if Kit and Peter were hooked up on a double. And she knew, do not look at their fish jumping. Don't look at anything except those baits. And she would keep them trimmed. And I can't tell you how many times she'd be, I'm bit right short. I take it out of gear and let her feed it. Boom, got them on. And that anchor, that third person, who just backing up your first mate was really important. And, it just was such a great chapter in our lives, and probably never to be repeated in my life. It's those are just such special times. So to answer the question, Peter Miller, Kit Toomey, just had 5 of the best years of my life fishing with them.
And I heard Kit has like some of the best fish eyes. Like he can spot fish super far away.
I'm embarrassed to tell you how many times he called a fish out from the cockpit and I'm in the tower and didn't see it until he pointed it out. That's a true story. But I might have been looking ahead of the boat for tailors or whatever.
Right.
But when he called it, it was happening.
You knew it.
When he said sail on the right middle, it's happening.
So what was this? And Peter told me to ask you about this. What was this one tournament? Because I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I'm just visualizing this. This one tournament where you guys won so much money that you had the money stuffed in your pants, and you looked like the Marshmallow Man.
Michelin Man. Yeah, they teased me about that.
Which one was that? Tell me that one. Tell me that story.
That was the first year in Key West when they had the World Sailfish Tournament. I can't remember if it was 2002 or 3 or somewhere around there, early 2000, maybe 3. I think it was 2003. And nobody knew these people. It was Chris King, Mike Weinhofer. Nobody knew this tournament. It's a new tournament called the World Sailfish Championship. And it was kind of a bold statement for a tournament that never existed before to be the World Sailfish Championship.
Yeah, right.
Great marketing, though. And they did something that nobody else did. They guaranteed $75,000 to first place, no matter how many boats entered. So that was a real eye opener. Like back then, 75 grand was a lot of money. And that didn't count the Calcutta.
Yeah.
So, we did it. And, the real interesting part was Chris King was from the West Coast, and he campaigned a lot around Tampa, Naples, Fort Myers, got a lot of boats from over there and boats from Mexico that were coming back from Isla Mujeres and Cancun, Cozumel to tie in their return visit. It was in April. So a lot of those boats were coming back. And so we had, I don't remember, maybe 80 boats, 100 boats, I'm guessing. And a lot of them were trolling deadbait because they were from Mexico, coming back with all their deadbait stuff. The boats that were flying kites, most of them were not flying 2 kites. And we we pulled it off. We won, and on the final day, we caught 6 fish to jump ahead of everybody, and back then it was all brown bag, and yeah, it was really good. It was it was fun. Yeah, we didn't even know. We really didn't even know how it was gonna go down. We check cash. I don't know. And
Peter said he was walking around holding the cardboard check, and you had money freaking stuffed out of your pockets.
Yeah, they gave me the money. They were gonna let me get rolled.
Yeah.
Guy comes up with a gun. He's gonna shoot me. And, yeah.
Yeah, then Peter will just take it.
Yeah, that's right. It's
Oh
fun.
man,
No,
we
we had so much fun, and I got to win 2 of those championships with them, and again, just magical times.
That's amazing. Was that 2 back-to-back ones?
No, it's I think 2003, 2007, or something like that, give or take a year. I can't remember, but yeah, it was neat to win it the second time, and then they went on to win it one more time with Quentin, who ran the boat after me, and Froggy was there for all 3 of them, John Cooper. So he was one of the few that won it 3 times. I won it a third time too on a different boat. I won a third in like 2014 or so.
So how many billfish tournaments have you won at this point?
Last time I counted, it was 30. And those are, blue marlin, striped marlin, swordfish, and sailfish.
And now do you count a win also if you pick up like a Calcutta win, like a side bet win?
Those are all first place overall.
Oh, okay. So all those wins are first place overall.
Overall, yeah.
Wow.
And there were, obviously there were a bunch where we won, a daily, or maybe the first and second place boat weren't in the money, or the first place boat wasn't in the Calcutta, and you're in second, but you won the money. We did that a fair amount of times, because Kit and Peter and Nick and people I fished with in later years all entered the Calcutta. That was always kind of a mandatory thing. And the furthest back in the pack that we ever won top money was in 14th place. And that was in a Bob Lewis tournament with a guy named Rick Newhouser on a boat called the Imagine. Fishing was horribly slow. I mean, really slow. And we made a big run from Miami all the way down to Conch Reef and caught 3 fish. We were only in 14th place. Maybe first place was 5 fish.
Yeah.
But nobody, the deal was there were so few. Maybe I want to say the first place was 4 fish and we had 3. We were in 14th place on time. But everybody ahead of us, almost none of them were the Calcuttas, because it was what happens is when the fishing is slow, anybody can catch a handful of fish. When the fishing is good, the cream rises to the top. All your best teams are going to catch the double digits and 20 and 30 fish, right? But this tournament was so slow. Believe it or not, after day 1, the drift boat in Miami was winning with 2 fish. True story.
Fuck out of here.
All right, in front of the boil.
That's crazy.
That's the only time the drift boat ever won the daily. It was in a Bob Lewis tournament. Yeah, it would have been, somewhere around, let me think about that. I can't even remember. That would have been about I don't even know, 2001 or something like that. And we were way down the list, but all the just everyday Joes were catching, 2, 3, 4 fish. And the big boats were struggling, and it's just funny. I never forgot that 14th place paid. It was either first place money or right there tied with the first place. It was like right first place or real close in 14th place, and it was because we entered everything. So we won other people's money in all those other categories.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the real lesson. Is if you got a team that you feel reasonably confident in, you got to be in the Calcutta.
Yeah, you got to be across the board, all chips.
You got to be. I could tell you so many stories where we won big money just because we won $99,600 in one of Jamie Bunn's meat tournaments.
What?
I was fishing with John Anderson on the Off the Wall, and they had that pick 3. I didn't even know what it was. I was such an idiot because I didn't fish many of the meat.
What is that for those that don't know? It's
like dolphin, wahoo, kingfish, cobia, blackfin tuna, yellowfin tuna, and they picked 3 species out of a hat. And that day it was cobia, dolphin, kingfish. and there were 3 boats that caught. The cobia was the hard one, and we did catch, a dolphin and a king that were qualifying size, and whoever got the most, pounds out of those 3 fish won. And we came out on top and won 99,000. I didn't even know what it was when I caught the cobia myself. I went along just kind of as an angler to, took my son Dakota. He was young, maybe 12 years old, and it was just a great opportunity for me to take him doing something that's just fast action, like king fishing. We literally were fishing like, 13 to 15 lines. So there's unlimited lines. You're fishing 3 kites. Some boats are fishing 5 kites. It's just chaos. And you just got fish coming to the boat, bonitas, everything, just always something going on. And I thought Dakota would really learn a lot from that. And I hooked the cobia, and we had the dolphin and the king already. And I got the cobia. I didn't even know it was a cobia. I dropped a sardine with a weight, and fish comes up to the surface, and everybody freaks out, like gaffs are flying. They throw it in the boat, and they're hugging me. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, it's the big 3. I'm like, what is the big 3? I don't know what that is. They're like, we might have won it. I don't know, and then, we got lucky and
God, that's
beat
crazy.
the other 2 boats that got it. And I'm just using it as an example of why you enter everything. We won $99,600. I remember thinking that Jamie should have put in $400 just to make it a $100,000. That's how I remember the number.
So that was your biggest Calcutta of your career?
Meat fish Calcutta.
Meat fish Calcutta. What was the biggest Calcutta of your career so far?
We've won over 400 a couple times, with marlin tournaments, sailfish.
$400,000.
Yeah, over that, pushing 5.
Shit.
Yeah,
what species in the like?
That was blue marlin and sailfish. We've done it a couple times.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, what?
Those are good times.
Let me. I don't even have this question written down, but what is the rush like when you catch a fish that not only is a fish that you have, done everything the average angler would do to try to catch that fish, but knowing that fish might have just won you 6 figures in money? I mean, what is the difference in the rush there? It's got to be significant.
Man, you're taking me down memory lane. If I started telling you stories, many of them involve tears because you work so hard and have so many heartbreaks. That story I told about the 19th year of the Miami Billfish tournament, finally catching the winning fish after blowing it 4 years. And by the way, it was mostly my fault that we lost the fish the 4 years during the 19th.
Oh, shit.
The 18th, because I would freak out. It's hit like we know we need one more fish. We're tied on, we're in second place, but tied. We're second place on time. And if we get one more, we jump the first place boat. That's kind of how it usually sets up. And there he is, with 10 minutes left in the tournament. And you just come unglued. And what you do is you freak everybody out. I watched my boss, who never backlashed a fish, Ken Grimes, who I worked for Caterpillar for all those years, never watched him backlash a fish ever. And I'm sure he was nervous too, but my anxiety freaked him out, and he backlashed and didn't tell me. He thought he could get it out, and I push ahead with the boat. We come tight, pow, broke him off, and fish goes jumping away like 10 times, solidly hooked, and
my God.
I just wanted to vomit. So I could tell you many of those sad stories. We lost 200 grand on a blue marlin in Mayaguez, Puerto Rico, that would have won us the series. I don't know if you remember the Billfish Extreme Release League with Norm Isaacs.
No.
It was a tournament that was televised, usually 6 boats, camera crew on each boat, and you traveled the Caribbean. So it might have been Florida, St. Thomas, Puerto Rico, Mexico, whatever, you just bounce around the triangle. And we had the winning blue marlin to win the series and the tournament. And it would have won us $250,000. And we fought it like it was on 30-pound test, and it turned out to be tail wrapped. And we brought it in stone dead, and it's coming up backwards, and it's floating on the surface, and we're about 30 feet from touching the leader and getting all the, getting the points. And a little shark came up and took a chunk, one of those cookie cutter sharks. It takes like the little, ice cream scoop out of it.
Yeah.
And we all watched it in slow motion. We're like, no, back up, back up. And we just couldn't get to the leader. It's like slow motion, just reaching to the leader and the shark shaking his head, eating the meat. And the judge goes, sorry, disqualified. And the difference was second place in the series, second place in the tournament, 50,000 instead of 250. So it was a 200,000 swing. And then in the World Sailfish, the second year we won it on the Get Lit with Kit and Peter, we caught 6 fish one morning and we're, leading the daily. And back then a daily was 200,000. Top boat for the day got 200 grand. And we're leading. Of course, you don't know if 9 is going to be the daily. So you're not celebrating, you're just excited, but, basically just got to catch everyone, right? That's your attitude. So hook a 7th fish and the fish is down deep, digging. I think Peter was on the rod. He's pulling, pinching the line, pulling. Leader comes up. Charmaine's holding Froggy's ankles. Froggy's laying out over the transom to reach at an extra foot. He grabs the leader, and the rule in that tournament is you had to retain a piece of leader. If he could have had a knife in his hand and grabbed the leader and cut it an inch below his hand, it would have counted. But he just reached far with one hand, grabbed it, and held onto it. And somehow he squeezed it so tight, the snap swivel broke in his hand. The leader shot out of the bottom. The cork and half of a snap came out the top of his hand. And he opened his hand. I'll never forget it. There's a half of a snap swivel. The part that, catches on the snap is in his hand. It broke at the bottom of the snap. And I tried to argue, hey, that's not part of the double line. That's got to be part of the leader, the swivel, right? We had the swivel. They disallowed it. And instead of 200 grand for the 7th fish, that 7 ended up being the top for the day. We ended up with 6 and in 5th place. Talk about the numbers game.
Oh,
how
God.
Baits change. We were in 5th place for the day and won 13 grand. So it was 187,000 differential because of that. Did not get an inch of leader. If we had an inch of leader, we win 200 grand.
Oh,
yeah, not that I really
God.
remember it very well. It's just a very faded memory.
Would you say that's one of your most disappointing losses?
Well, the 200,000 to win that BXRL I was like on ESPN. I mean, how cool would it have been to win the series and win the tournament?
Right.
Hail Mary, last day, got the blue marlin we needed, and come in 2nd place.
So do you think that you, like, whatever you want to call that, like you freaking out in that last moment, is that something you've had to work on over the course of your careers, like keeping your cool and keeping your calm in those tight moments? Would you say that's been one of your toughest things to work on?
Well, remember, most of that happened. Remember, I started working for the Kellys in 79, and the Miami Billfish tournament started, I'm going to say, like 83, 84, something like that. So a lot of those years that we blew it, or I blew it on the final day, were in the 80s and 90s. And then we won it with Nick, like, I want to say 2000, 2001, or 2001, 2002. I can't remember. But the point is, that year we won it. That was a good example of where, things that I learned with Nick and Kit and Peter is how to be calm. And that calmness is in the tense moments and becoming a little bit of a quarterback, so to speak. You're calling out the audible, you're like changing the play in midstream. Those are the things that make a difference when you can kind of look at the whole big picture and say, hey, instead of this fish, I see the rod tip throbbing, he's tail wrapped. Let's get away from that fish and let's go get this other one. I think that one's hooked cleanly in the mouth, or I think that one's foul hooked. Let's go after him right now. Back off the other drag, and you go get the release on the fish. And as soon as the mate touches the leader, boom, the hook pulls out of the skin. And now you go back and you get the one that's tail wrapped. It takes you a half an hour. And, those are the moments that define success versus failure. And it doesn't just happen on the captain's part. It happens on the mate's part, on the angler's part. I can tell you so many stories of anglers that did things like that story I told you about Nick, throwing a bait out and hooking a fish. I mean, there's just moments where that's the definition of the value of a good team, because each member of the team can make those snap decisions that make the difference between hooking a fish and losing a fish. And so many times, one fish made all the difference. One fish.
So,
I can't tell you.
in terms of the people on your team, how many mistakes does a guy get to make before they're no longer on your team?
Yeah, like the captain. Not many. I'm just kidding.
I mean,
Kit and Peter and Nick were very tough on me, but they made me better. But
gotcha.
most of the time, the people that are on the team have already been tested by fire. You fun fish together. Maybe you charter fished, or like in, Kit and Peter's case and Nick's case, they had fished so many years on their own.
Yeah.
I actually learned things from them. And I learned things from other anglers. I don't mean to diminish other anglers that I fished with. There's Harry and Cindy Shufflebarger, uh, uh, Tim Choate, the Schwest family.
Oh, Tim Choate. I love Tim.
Yeah.
I met him in Guatemala, and I had his daughter Steph on the podcast. She's got a couple
Oh, yeah.
world records.
Oh, yeah.
Tim is
Yeah.
he's a character.
Oh, yeah. And then there's Stephanie Choate, and there's Rick Murphy, and, just a lot of people. I know I'm leaving out several really good ones, but, fished with a lot of anglers that were really experienced. And I would have to say that I gained as much from them, if not more, than they gained from me. Because remember, a lot of the cases, guys like Tim Choate, he owned 4 different charter operations, multiple boats
Yeah.
in 4 different countries.
Yeah.
It was Costa Rica, Guatemala, Galapagos, and Brazil. Think about that. What did he see?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, what did he see? He had multiple boats chartering for years in those locations. And I mean, honestly, you got to get Tim on the podcast. He could write a book.
I tried to get Tim on. It was a little bit tough, I think, because it was our podcast is all audio. So
Yeah.
it was tough because we couldn't like look at each other, and
Yeah.
so I recorded.
You might have to make a special exception and go over to his house. But,
now that I live in Florida, yeah, I might have to do that exactly because I know so Peter actually invited me down to Pacific Fins, which is what what was it called? Something else when Tim started it. I think it was
Fins and Feathers.
Fins and Feathers, yeah. But that's where I met Tim, and that was actually the first and only billfish tournament I ever won. We actually won the 5th annual Guatemala Billfish Invitational. That was pretty cool. So, out of all these tournaments and all the money that you made off of them, have there been any wins that you've had that have mattered more than the money, and why?
Well, bottom line, the money is great, obviously, helps you pay the bills. But I'm a big believer in the value of riches that don't fit in your wallet, which are the moments, the memories, the people, the experiences that are bigger than the money. There's a lot of tournaments I couldn't even tell you how much we won. Most of them, almost all of them, as a matter of fact. But I can sure tell you every detail about winning the World Championship in Cabo, the IGFA Offshore Championship in Cabo. Won it in 2005 and 2006, representing the United States. It's kind of like the Olympics, and you are fishing against about 75 teams from 30-something countries. So you win no money. It's illegal. It's banned. I shouldn't say illegal. It's banned. It's against the rules to bet on the tournament. It's like the Olympics. And you win a Rolex if you win the tournament. And just the experience of kind of, in the Finisterre Hotel in the courtyard, down by the pool, you look up and there's kind of a U-shaped hotel, and everybody's got their flags hanging off the balconies, just representing where they're from. And you realize how fishing unites people from so many different places. And that's the special part. I've remained friends with a lot of people that I met fishing. I fished at 2005, 6, and 7. And I actually went to Australia to visit Bodo Muche, who made the awards, visited his house in Brisbane, been to Bermuda several times, hanging out with people that I met at the championship in Cabo, and, several other places. And you just, that was special. The Silver Sailfish Derby, we won it 5 times with Nick and Kit and Peter. And, just again, not much money. There is a small Calcutta, but it's the smallest Calcutta of all the tournaments. And yet to win the Derby even once is just a great honor. It's just kind of what's the right word? It's just steeped in history, for lack of a better term. It's the oldest billfish tournament in the United States, and you're fishing a lot against a lot of the guys that were from the Palm Beach, Stewart area, who really focused mostly on sailfish their whole lives. Guys like Nick Smith, and that was their primary focus. Like when you get down to Miami South, there's so many other fish: blackfin tunas, amberjacks, kingfish, snappers, groupers, yellowtails, muttons, so many things to fish, tilefish, so many things to fish for down south. In Palm Beach, you pretty much had kingfish and sailfish. That was your primary 2 species, and most people, most of the people in the tournaments always focused on the sailfish. And the Derby was that tournament that was the most iconic one. So I would say, ironically, the Derby and the IGFA Offshore World Championship paid the least and had some of the greatest memories. And it didn't hurt that the Derby had a 636 fish year, a 958, and I think an 1146 fish year, and we got to fish all of it. Yeah. And the 636, by the way, was the record for the most billfish caught in a U.S. tournament in one tournament. And it went on to shatter it. The next, a year or two later was the 958. And then a year or two later was the 1146, I think it was. That's I could be off by a couple digits. But, think of those years. That's what really cemented the Derby in everybody's brain. Anybody that fished those 3 years never forgot it. It was chaos. I had a 50 bite day in a tournament with 4 lines.
What?
Yeah. That's crazy. We caught 35 out of 50. And then in a later year on the Wheeze and the Keys, I was running it that year with Scott Robbins, another great angler, amazing guy to fish with. We caught 44 out of 50 the day before the tournament and didn't have our first bite till 9:30, and we were back at the dock at 5.
Damn, 44.
And we should have stayed. And that was with kites, twin engine boat. It wasn't running them down in a walk around. This was backing up, and this was in a traditional cabin boat. At that time, I didn't know anybody that caught 44 out of a cabin boat kite fishing. Yeah. They had done it on pods of fish, like balling bait. Actually, Steve, what's his name? Albert Johnston, and I want to say like in the 70s or 80s, caught like 83 one day, but backing into balls of bait. Yeah, that was in Boca, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
And it was look up Albert Johnston with a T. Johnston. He was an amazing captain, and he held the record for a long time, 83. And I think he still holds the record. I don't think anybody's broken that. Those guys in the Keys caught 70 or 72. I think Marty Lewis a few years ago caught 70 in a marathon on Taylor's. And then the next day, Roland Martin's son caught 72, I think it was, or 73. So I think,
that's just crazy. That is just absolutely crazy, man.
So, 44 sounds great, but it doesn't amount to much compared to those numbers.
70? I mean, what?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When they're pouring down in that powder, they're just like dark neon logs, coming down. They just stand out in that powdery water.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Yeah. So what are some of the biggest sacrifices you've made along the way to get to the level of success that you're at right now?
I'd have to say I really didn't make that many sacrifices because I've charter fished or fished for the Kellys. So I, fortunately or unfortunately, never really traveled that much. I mean, yes, I would go to St. Thomas for a week or two. I'd go to Bermuda or fish the Bahamas or Africa. I got to go to Australia for a month. But those weren't like regular events. So it didn't take me away from my family. So I have to say that I got enough traveling under my belt to really satisfy that itch, but I never really had to sacrifice like so many guys do in this industry, where they're running a, you know, 3, 4, 5, $6 million boat or more around the world, or at least, Atlantic, going to Ocean City in the summers, and, Caribbean in the spring and summer, and or the fall. They're just all over the place. Palm Beach in the winter, or whatever, South Florida in the winter. There's guys that literally live like gypsies. Those are the guys that sacrifice. So I actually felt a little guilty getting that award from the IGFA the other day, because I really don't think I sacrificed like a lot of people. I got to sleep in my own bed most of the nights. And, yes, I put in a lot of days. I started in 79, and, have done it, been a guide full time since then. But I don't look at that as a sacrifice. I look at that as a gift. I was so lucky to be able to fish with, I can't even begin to name or number the amount of great, great, great people, and, anglers and crew that I've been able to fish with. It has truly been, like I said, the riches that don't fit in your wallet. That's the best part of the people. I mean, I hate to admit this, but I hunt and fish all over the place with people that I met guiding, go deer hunting or
Yeah.
elk hunting or fishing this place or that place. And I don't even care if I'm successful on the hunt. The success is going to meet cool people that you really enjoyed being with. So, whether you're on their farm or their ranch or their boat, you go meet people with open arms and just go have a blast and be in familiar settings. And by the way, they know the area. Wherever you go to visit them, they're dialed in.
Yep.
And even if you're not successful getting whatever you're after, you just got to spend time with cool people in a cool place. And you gotta love waking up to that.
Definitely. Definitely. So what's the toughest part of the job?
Well, you got to be a fixer. You got to know how to fix stuff and fix problems and fix people's problems, and you got to know when to say, I can't fix this. And we got to, someone, let's just say a couple times I've had people abusing drugs or alcohol on the boat. You can't really fix that. The way you fix it is you go home. I mean, that I'm just telling you the worst extreme, right?
Yeah. You mean like a client on the boat, or like a first
client,
mate or
someone.
something?
So no, never crew. Our crew,
Gotcha.
fortunately, are all drug tested. To work on a charter boat in the United States, you're supposed to be part of a consortium. And that consortium is a random drug testing group that puts your crew through random tests. So it's honestly one of the greatest provisions that the Coast Guard could demand, because it means we
that's
work
great.
with really level-headed, good people.
And it's keeping everybody safe.
Correct. And I've only had one crewman ever in all these years not pass. And it was for a very minor incident, and we overcame it and, moved on and stayed working together. So, my point is, it's always been a protection for us. But every once in a while you get fishermen, anglers that are just, unfortunately, partying a little too hard. And I mean, I can count on one hand.
What do you mean? Like they're drinking too much, or they're doing like blow on the boat? Like what? Like
whatever, any of the above.
Yeah.
But I can count, fortunately, on one hand the number of times I came in early.
Oh, that's
Less
great.
than 5 times.
That's pretty
So
amazing.
I'm just using that as an example of when you can fix things and when you can't. That's something I can't fix, other than getting them back to safety. And but the fixing I'm really talking about is, an engine breaks down at sea. You better have the tools and the equipment and the parts to get yourself home, because we run single engine boats, at least our diesel boats are. And then, someone gets a hook in their hand. You got to know how to pull that out, or whatever you got to do. If it goes through both sides, you take bolt cutters. You got to fix it. You got to have the tools to do it. And, someone gets seasick. What do you do? How serious do they want to go in? Do you want to just get them to calm water?
Yeah.
Do you want to go? Because at the end of the day, everybody having a good time is the number one goal, and being safe. And then you got fixing things on shore, fixing problems for crew. We all have our ups and downs and sickness and so on. And, how do you mitigate all those problems? You got to have backup for the backup, whether it's
Right.
parts or people. And so those are some of the most challenging parts of the job, is knowing what to do in every situation. And then, trying to be proactive, having the right equipment, having the right bait, having the right approach, having a good network of friends on the water to help you catch fish every day. It's not easy to produce every day. And the real test is when you have a charter and it's a slow day and the people thank you at the end of the day and say it was a good day. Those are the days that honestly make me so happy, because when you've had a banner day, everybody's happy. But that's the test of a good crew, because on a tough day, believe it or not, it's a much harder job for the crew, because my crew probably hates to fish with me sometimes, because when I'm having a tough day, we might do 5 types of fishing. We might start out trolling, dolphin, tunas, kingfish, planers, whatever. And then we go, okay, let's put up the kites. Conditions are not good, but we try it for an hour. Nothing, not a single bite. I mean, I've had all these experiences. Then okay, let's troll out and tile fish. Oh, we're going to drop. Catch our 3 tiles. That's our limit. Okay, now let's go in. Oh, hit the wrecks. Okay, now we're going to drop on the wrecks. But the wrecks are slow, or the cudas are bad, or the sharks are bad. Okay, let's go vermilion fishing, 250. My poor mates, they hate. But it's good for them to understand that you're selling service, you're selling entertainment, you're
Right.
selling mainly effort. I was a client one time on a deer hunt in Canada. This would have been in the 90s. And these guys talked a big game. We were the first group into camp that year. We were there early season. They talked about how the bucks were still coming to the food, and they're in feeding patterns. They're not in rut chasing does. They're coming to the food. So we're all excited. Oh yeah, you're gonna be the first crack at them. You guys should all tag out. They put me in the stand, and the stand has like 12 inches of dead leaves in it, like a box blind. You climb up in this little house, and no windows on it, and the leaves have blown in all winter long, fall, summer, whatever, just debris just blowing in. And you look out there, and there's a pile of alfalfa 100 yards away, and there's no grass trampled down. Like, they just put the feed out and never even cleaned the stand out.
Right.
I'll never forget it. And their branches that had grown in the springtime had grown in the way. You didn't even have a clear shooting lane. And you go, man, I never forgot that day. And I've told it to my crew many times. Don't be that guy. Don't be the person that does not do the preparation. Don't BS somebody, because my motto is the truth comes out in the end. And when I climbed in that stand, I knew the truth. The truth was they got things ready, partially ready, the week before I got there, if that. Maybe the day or 2 before we got there. They didn't, and they forgot to clear out the stand. If they would have just scooped the leaves out of there, I might have not realized how unprepared they were.
Yeah.
And that was the point. I don't have to get a deer, but I just want to know that I've got a chance. Somebody that's guiding me has done their homework. And that's the guy that I try to inspire all my crew to be.
That's
the guy that did the homework.
That is the guy I want to fish with. That's the guy I want to work with. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I could think specifically about party boats up in New York City, and there's this one party boat that I absolutely love, because he will come over on the microphone and he'll straight up tell you, and he'll be like, I'm marking some here. We'll see if we get them. We'll see if we don't. Let's give it a shot. But he's hitting 12 to 18 to maybe 20 different pieces that day, whereas you go out on another boat and the guy anchors up on one spot and then maybe anchors up on another, and that's it. And you're just like, any real angler knows how much effort is being put in. And it's like, I feel the same way as you do about the tree stand thing. It's like, well, at least if I know that the crew and the captain just busted their ass to try to get me on fish and we still couldn't get them, I'm going to come back and fish with them. Like, even if we
Yeah.
didn't get any fish. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what you try to impress on the young guys, is that the effort matters. Effort matters.
it
And
totally does.
don't just BS them and tell them about they should have been there last week and how good you did last week.
Oh, I don't want to
Show
hear
them the
that.
effort.
No one
Yeah.
wants to hear that, man.
Yeah. Well, some
Oh, you
people
should
do
have
that
been here
behind it.
yesterday. Oh my
Yeah.
God. You tell me that, it's going to piss me off even more.
Right. That's it. Just, you don't have to say a lot. Just do a lot. That's my
Right.
motto.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. Do you have any superstitions?
None. I always say, um, yeah, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And I got lots of pictures of trophies next to bananas. So that's all I got to say about that.
That's great, man. That's great. What's the best like luck that you've had in a tournament, and what's like the most unlucky thing that's happened in a tournament? If we haven't
Wow.
if we haven't talked about it already.
Yeah, I mean the unlucky things were those, fish that we lost, and it was just a brutal
Yeah.
break, they
Like by
suffer
one
through.
inch or yeah.
But so in 1988, I won my first marlin tournament. It's called the Bertram Hatter Shootout in Walker's Cay, and I went the week before, week and a half before I fished that Miami Billfish tournament, and that was the year I'll never forget this swing of emotion. So that was the year, one of the 4 years that we lost the winning fish in the Miami Billfish tournament. So we led it all the way to like the last hour and a half on the last day, and we got bumped, and we had the chance to take the lead back, and we lost the fish, and I was devastated. Another second or third place, whatever it was, and we go to the next tournament. Remember, back then I was on the Tropicat that we only fished 2 tournaments a year, and they were back to back. So now we go to Walker's. Ed Cattell was my mate, and my first wife Marcy was the mate with Ed. And we, on the first day, wrapping around a school of skipjack tuna, we hook a fish. I don't really see the fish for like 20, 30 seconds, and all of a sudden it starts jumping, and he's enormous. And he jumps 40 or 50 times, and he spools us like, I don't even know, 500, 700 yards. He's way out there. He's all stretched out, and we're getting everything cleared. And I was a rookie captain. I was young. I just did a few things wrong. We got too much line out on him, and he got down deep on us and died, stone dead. And fortunately, my boss and I had fished some light tackle tournaments for the Rod and Reel Club where we would catch amberjacks on 8 and 12-pound tests, like 200, 300 feet of water. So he was a real master at holding the spool and just inching the fish up. And, when you have a marlin die on you, the way you get them up is you actually use water pressure on the line. You bump the boat really slow forward. The angler holds the spool, puts maximum pressure. And what happens is that line bellies, makes a big curve, and all of a sudden the fish starts sliding up. And 2 hours later, maybe 2.5 hours later, up floats a 653-pound blue marlin. We back up to him, put him in the boat, and we have 42 miles to go in 2 hours to make the deadline in a 20-knot boat. So the math was against us, and I am pushing the boat as hard as I can. I actually have to take a shortcut through a bunch of coral heads to cut 4 minutes off the run. And I literally pull in the marina on a plane, pull it off the plane, and we make it with seconds to spare. And we weigh the fish, and there's like 4 or 5 fish killed that day, and we were the biggest one. Several 4 or 5, 600-pounders, but 653 was the winner for the day. So we've won the daily. Day 2 comes, nobody beats us. Day 3 comes, a boat named Susie Q gets on the radio screaming, big fish, got him on, whatever. Puts him in the boat and switches over to a buddy, calls him, congratulations. Yeah, go up a couple. Well, we all go up a couple channels on the VHF. Listen, guy's like, yeah, I think he's 700. Just get the champagne ready. I am ready to vomit. I am so crushed. Remember the week before with an hour and a half left, we were winning, and I lose the lead. And so 1988, I'm 25 years old as a captain, and I have won one little sponsor billfish tournament in 1984. That's the closest I get. It was like a 15 boat tournament. That's the closest I've won a billfish tournament. And this is the first major. There's 60 boats. It's sold out. Like, it's a waiting list. And anybody is there. And I'm about to get knocked off again. The boat pulls in, and I see the tail sticking up in the cockpit. And I go, man. And I'm already like shaking. I'm nauseous. I'm just such a mess. I look at the tail. I go, that tail doesn't look that big. And weigh it, 427 pounds. And I don't know if they did it on purpose just to mess with me or what. But I see it. That's the second time I broke down in tears. I cried. They called out 427, and I just fell into my crew's arms. My wife and Ed, and the angler was Ken, my boss, and we did it. We climbed the mountain. That was
amazing.
The most come from behind, and that was never forget your first one like that.
Oh, that is some story. That is amazing.
Yeah, we were so close to getting disqualified by not making it in time, just whatever.
I mean, 700 and 400 is a big difference. I feel like they were messing with you.
I think they were screwing with us. Yeah. But, holy cow, just great memories.
What an emotional roller coaster, though. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So do you, I'm going to edit this part out, but just this part of the question, but I've been talking to my therapist lately about how whether or not this fishing, hobby of mine is closer to a gambling addiction or to a fishing addiction. So like, at what point, does the line get blurred between, all right, I'm kind of gambling here, but I'm also still doing what I love. Like I mean, how much of a similarity is this to a gambling addiction?
Well, I would define it more by the odds. So when you're dealing with a sailfish tournament, which is based on releases, remember I told that story about when the fishing was really, really, really slow. It's anybody's game.
Yep.
You don't really know that going into it. So you are putting money against the outcome, but it is based on what you perceive your chances of success are. And if you've got a good team, it's no different than engaging in business. You want to buy a car wash, you might not want to buy one, in Nevada, in the driest place in the world where cars really don't get rained on very much and get dirty.
Right.
You might want to, your odds are better of being in South Florida owning a car wash. So my point is, it's a little bit of a calculated investment. If you think the condition, remember you got weather reports, right? Okay, it's going to be real windy or it's going to be real calm. And believe it or not, I tell my anglers many times not to get in certain Calcuttas because I believe that it's somewhat predictable. Not you'll hear people say, "Listen, you got to get in across the board every time," and I'm not upset to get across the board, but I'll give you an example. Last year, we fished. I usually fish with Ariel from CV. And the final tournament of the year, he couldn't do. And we have a CV. So I said to Ariel, hey, can we, use the entry? And I got a guy that wants to charter me. He's like, yeah, have at it, represent CV. So we go out there in this little 34-foot CV, twin engine. Everybody else has 3 or 4 engines. And the guy was fishing by himself, one angler. So he's affording the whole enchilada. And I told him, don't get into X, but get into Y and get into Z. And believe it or not, I don't claim to be real smart about it, but believe it or not, we won. We came in 3rd place and won the Calcuttas. We won money in everything we entered. The ones we didn't enter, we would not have won money.
Wow.
Like, for instance, the winner take all. That's your riskiest one, right? Well, we came in 3rd place. We wouldn't have won money in the winner take all. And that's one of the Calcuttas I told him not to enter. And I told him, don't enter the fun fish because we're not going to fish wire. We're fishing only for sailfish.
Right.
And we did not catch a fun fish that would have amounted to anything. So fortunately, I kept him out of a couple Calcuttas. He could afford it. And we all made money in the end. And there's an example of how I would say it's not total gambling like rolling dice or playing cards. experience.
Right.
There is a much higher chance of success than there are in many other games of chance. So, it is a little blurry, but I like to say that if you've done it long enough, you can kind of look at the weather, the fishing conditions, how the bite's been, what's your bait supply. Think about your crew. How experienced is my crew? How many anglers? How experienced are those anglers? And all of those things become a formula, and you add it all up and go 80%, 40%, 20%. You kind of, there's times where we haven't gotten into Calcutta. I hate to admit it, but it would be like a first time group, and they're just, they're bringing their kids. We're not going to be screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
We're just, it's different than like 5 guys, right?
Yeah.
And there's many times in those situations that I have not gotten into Calcutta. Hey, let's just fish this for fun. The tournament pays $5,000 to first place. If we win that, we win it. Good on us. And I think that's part of being a good advisor. That's your job as a captain, to give good advice. And trust me, I hate to admit the tons of money that we've lost when I said to get in Calcutta. So I'm not always right, but you like to think you're making,
not always right.
Like
you're just never wrong, right?
Well, it's just like being a stockbroker, right? You just try to give good advice, and sometimes stocks tumble. It just happens. But it is part of the excitement. I have to tell you, it's not just the reward for yourself and your crew, but man, it makes you feel good when a guy puts, $10, $20, $30,000 or more on the line, and you yield a profit for that person. That feels really good. And then they're most likely going to come back, do it again.
Absolutely. So what's the single largest amount of winnings you've won in one tournament?
You're not going to believe this, but I don't remember the number, but it was somewhere around that 500 mark.
That's crazy.
Like I told you, I remember the details of some of the tournaments that were just, I don't know why. I can't remember the money. I can remember the losses. It goes back to that. You remember your failures more than your successes.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yep.
The success is just a happy memory, and you don't really dwell on the details.
So back in the day, were more of these tournaments like cash payouts? Like, did you look like the Marshmallow Man on more than one occasion, or?
Yeah, a couple times. But what's the statute of limitations? Just trying to remember that. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll Google it before I edit it.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
No. I'll have to tell you that for the last 15 years, there really hasn't been much cash. Yeah. So about 15 years ago, maybe it was 13, but somewhere in that range, the IRS got involved in a couple tournaments, and boy, everything changed. Everything became checks and
those fuckers,
1099s, and everything's documented now. So
took all the fun out of it.
Money all that money gets recorded now.
Yeah, it all gets recorded so we could send it over to Ukraine.
Yeah, well, whatever it takes. Yeah, whatever. I can't even.
We're not going to get started on that.
We're
not going to get started on that here, but that's a whole different podcast. But man, I feel like we could talk for a while. I would love to do a part 2. Yeah. I kind of have to run. I got to get the dog out. He's looking at me like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, but. Cap, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to talk more in the future and do a part 2.
That sounds great, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. You have a great rest of the night. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. If you like what you hear, please leave us 5 stars and a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Email a screenshot of it to info@brooklynfishingclub.com and we'll send you a free shirt. Be sure to tune in next week for episode 57. Till then, tight lines, my friends.
Hey, don't you walk on me.